Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Thomas. I'm the author of the file, and first off I'd like to say thank you very much for purchasing Touch Gestures 4K. In this video I'm just going to be going over the basics of how to use the gestures in After Effects, and in the next video I'm going to go over how to use the devices, and then you'll be all set to go. It's a very simple setup that I have in here, but there are a couple quick things I want to go over with you for best practices to get you up and running as quick as possible. So let's dig into the project. Now on the project panel, we have the All Gestures, which should be open when you open up the project file. We have the comps, and within that we have all the different 1, 2, 3, 4 finger gestures and the scroll and zoom. And then below that we have the actual 4K footage that all the gestures are recorded on. We have the images, and within that we have the photos that I used in the demo, the websites I used in the demo, and the vector devices that we're going to be using in the next video. And then below that we have our nulls, solids, and some comps that I made for these tutorials. If we click into the All Gestures, you can see that we have all the 1 finger, 2 finger, all the same comps that we saw within the comps folder in there. These are all organized, so if you just want to look at them back to back, and they're separated by a different color, so it makes it kind of easy to visually see what it is you're going for. But I would guess most of the time you're going to be taking the comps from this folder rather than this All Gestures folder. Let's dig into one of the gestures. So let's go into 1 finger swipe left. And within that, you can see, and these are all set up the exact same. We have a null, we have the gesture, and we have a shape layer. Now the null is a parent that has keyframes on it. If you hit U while the first layer is highlighted, you can see that I have 2 keyframes set in this particular example. Now this has the X position animated. So it makes sense for this gesture that just the X position is animated because it's just moving something to the left or right. It doesn't move up or down in Y space. Now this layer is connected, the shape layer, the blue layer that you see within here is connected to it via parenting. So there's 2 ways to parent something. You can either pick whip it and bring it over there, or you can select from the drop down to parent something. And if you're unfamiliar with how parenting works, just take a second to Google it and learn a little bit about how it works. But the gist of it is it takes the keyframes from the parent layer and it does the same thing to the child layer. So that would make sense in this example because we have the null object that's being animated, and if we unparent it, you can see that the blue box doesn't move at all. But now, if we go to the very first keyframe, and this is very important with this project, when you're parenting something, the position of where the current time indicator is when you're parenting an object is very important. And let me show you an example of that. What you want to do is you want to start, whenever there's a keyframe that I have set up for you already, you want to take the layer that you want animated and parent it by selecting the layer from the dropdown, and then it'll just work. Now, the problem is, what if I go back to the beginning, I unparent it, and halfway through I parent it? Now you can see that we're not quite getting the right result that we want. So that's the first tip. If something doesn't look right or the animation looks way off, it's probably because you parented it in the wrong spot. And what you can do is just unparent it, go back to the first keyframe, bring the layer that you want to the beginning. I'll just center this kind of in the fingernail, and then parent it. And then that will just sync up exactly how it's supposed to. So let's use a real example of this. Let's make a new comp, and we'll just name this test for now, and we'll make it Full HD 1920 by 1080 square pixels. Now this frame rate, I want to explain this really quickly. Touch Gestures 4K was shot in 60 frames per second, and that's not really going to affect your comps for whatever you're setting it in. That's not going to look slowed down or sped up or anything. It's just going to look really crisp if you do choose to use a higher frame rate. So let's select 30 for now, just for the example, and we'll set the resolution to half because when you're dealing with 4K footage, it does start to get a little bit more intense for After Effects. And we'll set the duration to 1000, and we'll change the background color to white. Now, if we go to All Gestures and we select one of the gestures, now you can either do this one of 2 ways. You can either grab it from here and copy and bring it in and paste it into there, or you can just go into the comps folder and go to 1 finger and then 1 finger swipe. Doesn't matter. Let's do swipe right and drag it into there. Now you can see right away, if we zoom back a little bit, that this is the beauty of using 4K. Now we get the benefit of having it look really sharp at a lower resolution. So we get it to the size that we want it to be. And the way that I would suggest doing it from here is to go in, double click into there, and disable the shape layer by hitting the eye icon beside it, taking the one finger swipe right, null, hitting Command C to copy that or edit copy, go into the comp we were just in, and select one finger swipe right. And then you're just going to want to paste that into there. Now once you have that pasted into there, you're going to want to check the eye icon so that we can see the null position. And you can see that it's way over to the right. And the reason that's way off is because if you go into the one finger swipe right, you can see that this comp is much larger. This is the 4K comp. And if you go to the test layer, that this one is the full HD layer. So it's still getting those position points from the 4K comp. So what we want to do is we want to move that over to the new position that we have. Now the way you want to do that is you want to hit U so you can see where the position is on the null. And what you want to do is you want to go to the first keyframe and you want to hit the X position in the timeline, and then that'll select all the keyframes within there, including the first one. And then when you move over the position, it'll affect all the keyframes and not just the one that you're on. So I'll drag that over and then I'll hit UU, so then we have the Y position come up as well, and I'll drag that up and I'll zoom in just a little bit so we can see. And when I made these examples, I had most of them kind of hit in the middle of the fingernail, so that's what I'm shooting for right now. So I'll have this go up just a little bit further and hit the X position again so it highlights both of the keyframes, and move that over. And then if we go to the end position, you can see that that's actually a little bit off too. And the reason why the X position, the second keyframe, is off is because of the scale that we adjusted with the gesture. So with these, you're going to have to adjust them just a little bit on some of the different examples, but think of the keyframe examples as good starting spots for you. So we're going to move just this keyframe over by we're not going to hit X position when we're on that keyframe. We're just going to have this one highlighted and we're going to move it over. And the last thing we need to do is to bring something in there to have the gesture move. So I'll grab one of these photos and I'll scale it down, something like that, and I'll move it below the gesture so it's behind it. And I'll move it up just a little bit more, kind of center that on there. And then when we have the current time indicator on the first keyframe, and then all I have to do is parent that layer to the null. I'll select that. And the other way to do that would be to pick whip it and bring it over, and then that'll parent it as well. And our gesture is all set up. Now the last thing you want to do is fine tune your gesture. And if you're not familiar with how the X and Y position is separated in this null, if I go to the layer 2 and I hit P, you'll see that these aren't separated. If I highlight that and I right click and do separate dimensions, that separates the X and the Y out. And that works really well for when you want to fine tune the X and Y position in the graph editor. So then what you're going to want to do is select the X position and select the graph editor, and then you can fine tune these gestures to exactly how you think they should be with your particular movement. And this is important because all the gestures are set up to be kind of linear, where they start here and end where the gesture stops moving. But in reality, a lot of times people want the gesture to kind of overshoot, something like that. And when it comes to those type of movements where it's kind of like a throw, you're going to have to fine tune that yourself. And the reason for that is there's just no way I can know what would work perfectly for you. I tried to do it as best I could to get a setup that started for you and then have you finish it with your exact position and scale or whatever you want for your project. Alright, so that covers all the basics for the gestures. In the next video, I'm just going to be going over how to edit the devices, and then we're all set. So let's start out by making a new comp, and we'll make it the same size and frame rate and everything as the last comp that we created in the previous tutorial. I'll rename it device. Now within this comp, we want to add one of our devices from within the images folder. So I'll go into the vector devices, and let's use an iPad Air White for this example. And we'll drag it into there. And you can see that it's pretty small right away, but all of these are vector files. So we want to scale them up. So I'll have this highlighted in the device, and I'll hit S to scale and drag this up to the size that we want. And we'll make it relatively large for this demo. I'll make it like 230, something like that. Now you can see on the edges right away that it's kind of blurry and pixelated, and the way to fix that is, since it's a vector, you can select this checkbox right here, and this is the collapse transform, which is not what we're using it for, and also the continuously rasterized checkbox if you have a vector file. So once we click that, we instantly have a sharp vector image. How we're going to make a screen is we're going to go to the rectangle tool and we're going to have that selected, and we don't want any layers in the timeline panel highlighted, because if we do and we use that, it'll create a mask, and that's not what we want it for. We want to create a shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the top left with the rectangle tool and drag to the bottom right. And then I'm going to hit UU on that shape layer, and that brings up the rectangle path size. That's what we're after. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to hit New Solid, and then I'm going to do 550. I'll do it just a little bit larger, 555 by 775. And now we've made our screen for the project. So you can delete the shape layer now because we don't need that anymore. And from this step, there are two ways to do the screen. The first way is to use this layer as a matte, and the other way is to pre-comp it and put your layer within that pre-comp. So I'll do the matte layer first. We'll take a website. I'll just use website 1 that I used in the demo and drag that onto there and scale it down. And then I'm going to take the layer and put it below the white solid that we just created. I'm going to go to the track matte. If you're not seeing that, it's because this collapse or expand the transfer controls is not checked. So you want to check this middle box down here in the bottom left, and then you want to go to the track matte and do alpha matte, and then that'll create a matte with this layer. So that's the first way to do it. I'll undo that, undo, undo, undo. So then we're back to the beginning. The other way to do it is to pre-comp this. You can go to Layer, Pre-compose, and then we'll just name this iPad Screen. And this is actually the way that I did do in the demo. It's not the right way, it's just a way to do it. And then within there, you can drag the screen into there and scale that to the size that you want. So that's the other way of doing it. Now all we have to do is add our gesture into this. So I'll do comps, one finger, we'll do one finger tap. We'll do the basic gesture on this one. We'll scale that down. And the cool thing about having these different shapes in there is you can kind of see like where the gesture is going to hit or start at. So let's pretend that we want it to tap on this photo right there. So I'm going to drag that shape down to there, and I'm going to bring the current time indicator to kind of the middle of the gesture so we can get the proper scale of the hand, because now it looks like a giant screen. So we'll scale this to like 70. That'll be pretty close to the size of the hand size compared to the device that we're using. And that's the cool thing about using 4K footage. You have a lot of flexibility in the scale. So now that we have that right, all we have to do then is double click into there and select the one finger tap. I'm going to copy that, Command C or Edit Copy, and then I'm going to turn the eye icon off on the shape layer so that we're not seeing that anymore. I'll go back to the iPad screen. I'm going to paste that into there. The cool thing about pasting this into here is the actual parent is the exact length of the gesture itself. So when we go into here and you hit UU, I know from these keyframes that I have set up for you that that's exactly when we want to animate or do whatever within the iPad screen. So let's say, for example, I want to make it have a little overlay. So I'll just make a rectangle and we'll make it white. And so for this particular example, I'm not actually parenting anything. I just know that this exact time it's going to be tapped. So what I can do is I can hit T to turn the opacity down to like 20%. And then I'll set a keyframe there and then go to this first one and have the opacity be 0. And then here back to 0. So then you can see that it highlights it. And then when we go back into here and we watch everything, that just syncs up. Now, if you're doing a lot of animations within the apps, it may be easier for you to do everything within this one comp rather than editing it in here, going back to the main comp and seeing how everything looks, tweaking back and forth and back and forth. The first option using a matte, and then what you would do is you would go into the gesture and then select the parent that you're going to be using and then pasting that in here, and then you're not having to go back and forth all the time. And that is actually how I did the demo, was once I had everything set up within the main comp that I was using, then I pre-comped them into the comps to make it look more clean when you looked at the demo file. All right, you guys, that is everything. If you have any questions at all, I want you to feel free to message me at any time. I can almost always get back to you within the same business day, and usually in the weekends as well. All right, thank you very much again, you guys. Have a great day.